Hi, my name is Sam Rusk. You may know me from my nerdy tattoos or my D&D art illustrations. I've made a couple other videos where I talk a little about how I got into tattooing and how I got into playing Dungeons and Dragons, and sort of how the combination of those two things came to be for me. But today I wanted to talk a little bit more about just D&D, while I draw a traditional tattoo style Displacer Beast, because it's probably my favorite thing ever. On my social media, I mostly post Dungeons & Dragons, fantasy, and nerdy tattoos because that's what I'm really passionate about. But I get to make all kinds of different tattoos for all kinds of different people. But when they come to my station, it's covered in nerdy tattoo flash, D&D tattoo sketches, Lord of the Rings Funko Pops, there's D20s everywhere. It's very obvious that I am really into these nerdy things. And that gets a lot of people asking questions about Dungeons & Dragons and how you start playing. People get really curious who've either never played Dungeons & Dragons or any tabletop games for that matter, or if they're just beginning, they'll ask advice. Maybe advice about how to get started or any tips for beginners. I love getting this question. My go-to answer is checking out a friendly local game store to pop into for a game. Check out the endless amazing YouTubers, TikTokers who are fountains of knowledge, and just watching actual plays like Critical Role or Dimension 20 or the other amazing actual plays that people have on YouTube or Spotify. But sometimes I feel like that nasty imposter syndrome beast rear its stupid face, and I question if I have anything personal to give to this conversation. Like, what have I learned and what advice could I give myself from my own experiences at the table? So after some reflection, I wanted to talk about 4 major things that I have personally learned from D&D and would tell any beginner. Number 1, most importantly for me, don't stress about role-playing. If you're getting into TTRPGs, especially as an anxious person like myself, don't put too much pressure on yourself to be an expert role player. Yes, D&D is a lot of role-playing, and you should let yourself be open to being silly with your friends, playing your character, and bouncing off of your fellow players and GM. But what I mean is, if you need to dip your toes into role-playing and you're not comfortable at first, make a character that's maybe more like you, or a character that you know really well from a beloved book or a show. Someone whose motivations and personality you know really well. That way when your really roleplay heavy moment happens, you know exactly what your character would do. My first D&D character, Quinn, was very much a version of me. If I had amnesia, could sword fight, and swore myself to the Stormlord and had regrets about it. But her personality being very close to mine made roleplaying easy for a first character. I could have fun in the game and not sweat over what is my character going to do if this happens, or what would she do in this situation, etc. So just go easy on yourself, and don't feel like you have to be an expert role player right away. Number 2, if you're an adult with a crazy schedule like most of us, and you want to get into playing TTRPGs, yes, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is wonderful, but it is a lot. There's a lot to know, memorize. Sometimes it can take an hour or more just to make your character, which is totally fine, and I say this as someone who loves playing 5e. It's my go-to TTRPG, and it's the first one that I played and I fell in love with. But there are a ton of other systems that are definitely easier to pick up, and you can play a lot faster and a whole lot less prep and stress for a newer group, especially the Dungeon Master. And even for long-running groups who've played D&D for years, switching to easier, quicker, more intuitive systems is sometimes desirable. Shadowdark, Monster of the Week, Call of Cthulhu. There are also systems that are like 1 or 2 pages that you could pick up and start playing a game with in minutes. Roll for Shoe, Honey Heist. Mouseguard is an awesome system where you get to play as mice and fight cats and skunks. There are also so many cool games that you can play to get a little TTRPG warm-up before diving into 5e, if it's either intimidating or, more often than not, the time commitment is tough. Number 3, sometimes it's just hard to get a group together. There are so many online resources to get a party together, or in person at game shop events. But did you know there's also solo TTRPG games? I haven't fully dived in yet, but Shadowdark has a very cool solo system called Solo Dark. You'll probably hear me talking about Shadow Dark a lot. It's a super sleek, player and GM friendly system that is definitely an old school AD&D vibe mixed with some modern 5th edition setup. Perfect for those that love a good dungeon crawl, like myself, fight some monsters, pray you survive, and get your loot to level up. But you can also play with just you too. I recently got a really cool solo TTRPG from Unite the Realm called Domain of the Night Hag. It uses a card deck and a d6 system, and it's easy and fun to pick up. So if you got the TTRPG itch and can't play with anyone, want to practice with some gameplay, or you're dying to try out a new character build and you don't have a group at the moment, try a solo game. Number 4, when you're playing with your group, don't forget to yes and. D&D was really my first introduction to improv of any kind, and in the beginning sometimes you have an idea in your head of how something is supposed to go or how something is, but the most important thing when playing with your group or GMing a game is remembering that this is a collaborative story. Yes, D&D gets silly, and it will always be silly, but that's where the fun comes in. Whenever it's possible, let your character add to an idea with a yes, and then this happens, or yes, and I do this. One time when I was DMing Curse of Strahd, and at a very tense moment where the terrifying Strahd von Zarovich shows up on his midnight black steed, mane and tail of flame, fire shooting from its nostrils to intimidate the party while in a graveyard, my chaotic player rolls to boop the snoot of the literal nightmare steed of the Lord of Barovia. If I would have said, no, you can't do that, that would have been a vibe killer and against the spirit of the game. Players can try to do anything they want. Did they roll a natural 20 to boop the snoot? Yes, they did. Was it how I imagined my spooky horror Strahd game was gonna go? No. But not to worry. They take a little fire damage, and Strahd will pay them back for their disrespect when they come to dinner at his castle next session. I hope this has been a little helpful if you're wanting to jump into Dungeons & Dragons and TTRPGs. I'll be making more drawing videos and chatting about D&D and tattoos soon.